Well, thank you for joining me once again, where people continue to be wrong on the interwebs, don't they? Yes, without let or hindrance. Recidivist offenders they are again. Today we're dealing with Simon from Essex. Once again, Simon, for those that don't know, goes by Gojiman, but we just call him Berry Boy. This is a boy who thinks himself awfully knowledgeable in the field of human nutrition, although he's not. Basically, this is yet another one of these completely vacuous, imbecilic morons who believe, for some ridiculous reason, that the correct approach to human nutrition is to eat nothing but plants. You're wrong, Simon. You've always been wrong on this. You will always be wrong on this. And in this video, once again, there is quite a bit of you being wrong. So let's hear about the wrongness, and we'll put it right where it is wrong, and that'll be everywhere, I suspect. Off you go, Simon.
To the video.
But I think the biggest thing for me that I've changed my mind on since I wrote the book in 2019 was carbohydrates.
Oh, you mean those things that humans are designed to run on?
False, Simon, they are not. No amount of espousing your ridiculous, vacuous, and farcical opinion on that will change the biological facts about what it is that humans are actually designed by natural selection pressure to run on. And it's not carbohydrates, son.
And then in connecting with that, the ketosis and ketogenic diets. So when I wrote the Carnivore Code, and this is humbling, this is what we all do, is we write books.
No, we don't all write books, Paul. No.
And then you put your thoughts into cement, you freeze your thoughts in kryptonite, and then you change your thoughts.
So you
yeah, but I don't, though, Paul, because I get my thoughts in order before I communicate publicly about what my thoughts should be. It seemed from your original book, The Carnivore Code, that you too had done that, and you had it right at that time, about 4 years ago now. And then you completely lost the plot. You left the building. I suspect you were paid off to change your opinion publicly, actually, but that's for another day. And since then, Paul Saladino, you've been espousing and spouting nothing but excremental nonsense based on an absolute ignorance of the science and physiology underpinning the situation here, and indeed making ridiculous, farcical statements that are demonstrably false about what the literature says, making a fool of yourself, basically. Paul Saladino is not a source of valid, reliable, or robust information on human nutrition, physiology, or the interpretation of science. Okay? Sorry about that.
Tell the world that fruits and carbohydrates are bad for people and that they have no place in the human diet.
That was correct in the first instance.
And then you change your thoughts.
Well, that's because, basically, Paul Saladino is completely out of his lane here, just like you are, Simon. Just like Paul, Simon, you have absolutely no grounding in this field whatsoever. You are not an expert in nutrition.
Paul calls this humbling. I say this is absolute stupidity.
Yeah, but that's coming from you, though, Simon. A boy who could not get entry into a PhD program because people took a look at you and went, no, we're not giving you the platform. We're not letting you into the program. Okay? You finished, in my understanding, a master's degree in public health, I think it is, which basically, Simon, is a Wednesday afternoon degree in bumfuckery. That's nothing to do with science, physiology, nutrition, or anything else. You have no credence here, no credibility here. You are a buffoon. What's next?
And Paul is clearly a flip-flop dieter who has...
Yes, Paul is an idiot. I agree. That's the most sensible thing I've ever heard you say, Simon.
Has no concept over human nutrition.
Neither do you, Simon, as I've just outlined. None at all.
It probably won't be too long before he changes his mind again.
I agree. It probably won't. Because Paul is an idiot without any basis or understanding. Ergo, his opinions are based on what's popular at the time, it seems.
And then starts a whole new dietary pattern. Who needs nutritional scientists in the world when we can all rely on the likes of Paul Saladino to...
Or indeed Simon, because you don't have any grounding here either, still.
Guide us.
And you think, oh, the book, it's just not a living document. So, but when I wrote the book, I was of the opinion that carbohydrates were not great for humans.
And you were correct at that time, because they're not.
Was sort of looking at the literature differently. And over time, I learned personally in my own life, doing a carnivore diet of meat, organs, And
that was the mistake. Insufficient protein for your individual requirements because you're very active, and far too much liver, Paul. That's what you got wrong. You did it wrong, Paul. You never really were a carnivore, at least not a human one. You ate a diet that is not appropriate for your speciation, and you suffered health decline as a result. What you should have done, Paul, is ask somebody who knows something about that. Someone like myself, Paul. Instead, what you've done is falsely claim authority in this field, knowledge in this field, on the basis that you have a medical qualification, which has nothing to do with nutrition at all, and went off half-cocked under your own steam. What you needed to do was humble your ego and talk to someone who could have helped you with this. Would have been fine.
Fat and salt for a year and a half that, including carbohydrates in my diet, improved my health from there.
That's because your health failed to the point where you suddenly required those on the basis, Paul, that you did it wrong. What you needed to do was increase your protein, I suspect, decrease the number of times a day that you were eating, I suspect, and absolutely get rid of all this excess toxic liver that you were consuming. That would have seen you right. You missed the boat.
Scary that he convinced himself and many others that the carnivore diet is optimal for human health.
Well, it is, Simon. Human beings have been obligate hypercarnivores for 4.5 million years. It is optimal, Simon, whether you like that or not, whether your theology can accept that or not, makes no difference. The facts remain. It is an optimal diet for human beings. Fact.
Let's just ignore all of the science in the world.
Well, Simon, show me some. Shall we wait? What we will do, Simon, is ignore, by way of dismissing and debunking, pseudoscience, ridiculous nonsense, and claptrappery that just happens to have been published. Publication does not confer veracity on misinformation.
Oh, what's that? I feel rubbish on the carnivore diet. Best add some of the...
No, Paul felt rubbish on a diet which is completely inappropriate for his speciation, Homo sapiens sapiens. What he needed to do was correct his diet to one that is appropriate.
Those plant things back in.
No. Mistake. Have a look at a picture of Paul Saladino when he quit the carnivore lifestyle, even the inappropriate one that he was on, about 4 years ago. Compare that with an image of Paul Saladino today and tell me no damage has been done by adding plants back in. Dare you? Shall we discuss this? Let's have a look at it.
Who knew?
So
I know. Trust me, I am the science. You're not, by the way, Simon, and neither is Paul Saladino.
whole story is that I was eating kind of a paleo diet, had really bad eczema, which I'd had my whole life. Getting rid of vegetables and all plant food significantly improved the eczema, so much so that in the last 4.5, 5 years since I've been on this more specific path, I haven't had any flares of the eczema that are significant at all.
Maybe instead of risking your health and your viewers' health, you could have fixed the underlying cause of your eczema to begin with.
Oh, is that right, Simon? A thing about which you have absolutely no training or expertise whatsoever. You are not qualified to comment in this field.
But maybe that is too simple.
I'll tell you what's too simple, Simon. Some rhyme about a pieman.
Big deal, because I had massive eczema on my elbows, my wrists, my hips, so much so that I really couldn't even wear pants easily. It would get on my shirts. I couldn't
Pants are overrated anyway, Paul.
do jujitsu because I had eczema on my knees and it was getting infected. So getting rid of vegetables really helped with my eczema. And then I learned after a year and a half that I was getting such bad muscle cramps, heart palpitations, sleep disturbances. My testosterone was kind of going down. Right now it's around 700 or 800. I've included carbohydrates in my diet for the last 2.5 years. But at that point it was going.
At what point, Paul, did you exhibit any signs of lack of masculinity whatsoever? Should we wait for that? Who gives a rip-roaring f*** what your testosterone level is in your blood.
Going 450, 500, significantly lower. And my sex hormone binding globulin was creeping up. So I had electrolyte issues.
Yes, they were caused by the insufficiency of one decent bolus of protein in the day of a sufficient amount and too much copper in the form of having derived that from eating far, far, far too much liver, Paul.
And what I realized was that I'd been thinking about insulin wrong.
Again,
you've been thinking about everything wrong, Paul, for the last 4 years. Absolutely everything, it seems.
The absolute arrogance of these types of...
Says Simon the Pieman. Arrogance, he says. This is a boy with a master's degree in number fudging and no qualifications in physiology, nutrition, medical science, or anything remotely related to how the human body works whatsoever. At least Paul Saladino has a basic medical degree, and then he specialized in psychiatry after that. Interestingly, though, he's never practiced medicine, not a single day in his life. So not Dr. Saladino, while vastly more credible than you are in terms of training and experience in the field at all, Paul still scores 0 in terms of his credence to speak on human nutrition and physiology. You, therefore, score minus several million, Simon.
The people is insane. There are
insane, Simon, and arrogant, Simon, is what you are doing. It's projection that you paste that onto Paul Saladino.
Are thousands and thousands of articles on insulin and carbohydrate.
Yes, so what?
But that wasn't good enough for Paul. He knew best.
Well, no. Actually, he never did. In fact, that's my whole point. And neither do you, Simon, still.
And now he has this mass epiphany that you eat carbs, the insulin goes up, and this is a normal and natural physiological response.
Yeah, but also, Simon, you eat enough protein in a single meal, and guess what happens? Yeah, that's right. The insulin goes up, and that protects the function of the kidneys and helps you preserve your electrolytes so that you don't lose them and end up with a problem like Paul had. Also, it protects your thyroid function and a bunch of other things that do rely on some insulin signaling. Certainly, it doesn't need to be a big spike like you'll get from carbohydrates taken in exogenously. You can achieve a sleeping policeman style insulin response to a decent bolus of protein in one meal. And that's what you should do as a human being, because that's what's appropriate for your speciation. That's what's indicated by your genetic gift, your anthropological past. Those are the genes that are positively selected for, and the genes that are not helpful in that respect are the ones that have been selected against, Simon.
In the human body.
I've been thinking that I needed to keep my insulin low all of the time.
Well, that's false. That is rubbish. You do not need to do any such thing. Hey, Thomas. Good to see you, mate. For those who are interested, it's interesting. I've seen a video put forward by Thomas DeLauer in the last few weeks where he's indicating that stem cells are not required for some reason. No, not so, Thomas. Stem cells absolutely are a vital part of your renewal and repair process in the human body, actually. And encouraging your body to release more adult stem cells is, in fact, beneficial. I know that you actually are aware of this, Thomas, because, for those that don't know, Thomas DeLauer is an affiliate for Cerule products. Yes, those products that do increase the release of adult stem cells. So everybody, let's teach Thomas a lesson by going to his store and buying Cerule products if you're not already a customer of mine. By the way, Thomas is in my Cerule organization, so I'll still get paid when you do go and buy stuff from him. Well done, Thomas. Welcome to the family of Cerule distributors. In the meantime, let's carry on and listen more to Paul and Simon.
And to be fair, on a carnivore diet, my fasting insulin was low, 3.5.
By the way, for those who want to know what the secret to a successful distribution business in the Cerule business is, I'll tell you the secret. I'll tell you, Thomas, right now. It's not a secret. Tell people about Cerule and they'll come and buy it from you. Okay? What's next?
3.0. And I thought incorrectly that if I ate carbohydrates, my insulin would spike and that would be a bad thing, right?
Insulin spike is a bad thing. It's like listening to a flat earther, isn't it?
No, it isn't. Not at all, Simon. Nonsense.
What I realized, and I wasn't taught this in medical school,
That's what's called a straw man argument from Simon there. It's just utterly ridiculous.
was that insulin spikes after you eat carbohydrates are actually healthy for the human body.
Insulin spikes.
False. A sleeping policeman pump in your insulin, useful once a day at least, hopefully. Spikes, no, not good for you, not at all. False.
Are a totally normal response by the body.
Okay. So is bleeding to death when someone cuts a major artery in your body. That's a perfectly normal response. Does that mean it's good for us to bleed out when we're cut? Goodness sake. Everything that's normal is good. That's some good logicking, Simon. What else have you got for us?
To get glucose from the blood to where it is needed in the cells.
Okay. Yes, at rest. What about during exercise, Simon? Do you know anything about that? I know you don't. Are you aware of the fact that during exercise, glucose can get into the skeletal muscle cells, bypassing the insulin activation requirement situation? Did you know that? I bet you didn't.
Again, he makes it sound like some big revelation and groundbreaking discovery. But
No, he doesn't. That's your interpretation, Simon. And it's farcical and ridiculous, just like your interpretation of everything else you've ever spoken about publicly, as far as I've seen.
Let you into a little secret, Paul. Human bodies have been doing this since the beginning of time.
The beginning of time, human bodies have they, Simon? It used to be thought until very recently that the beginning of time was 13.8 billion years ago. We now understand on the basis, it seems, from the new James Webb telescope, that in fact, the universe is at least twice that old, in fact. Humans have been around for about 350,000 years maximum, Simon. So get your facts straight. Basically, nitpicking, I know, but it's a lot of fun, isn't it, kids?
And we have fared pretty well.
For a variety
It says who?
of reasons. So insulin is probably something else I've changed my mind on, carbohydrates and insulin. What I realize now...
Now, Paul Saladino thinks a great big insulin spike is a good thing. You're an idiot, Paul. You're an absolute idiot. Sorry. Just the facts.
Is that your body needs an insulin signal after a meal.
Yes, but it doesn't need to be a spike. In fact, it needs not to be if you want to maintain health long term. One spike here and there, the occasional spike, by way of caveat, should not be a real major problem. Constant spiking every single time you pour food resembling slop down your stupid neck multiple times a day, Paul, that's a very, very bad idea. Very bad indeed.
Meal, when you eat carbohydrates, to signal to the kidneys to resorb and hold on to minerals, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium.
Yes, and what kind of insulin signal is required to achieve that? That's right, that one. Is that required? No, it isn't.
It's a fair bit more complex than he is suggesting.
Well, tell us all about the science on this, Simon, because you're such an expert in this field.
So his statement is a little bizarre.
What's bizarre, Simon, is you imagining yourself competent to speak in this field because, son, you are not.
The kidneys regulate electrolyte balance through their own mechanisms, which are
affected directly by sensing insulin, you silly turd.
only partly influenced by insulin's metabolic effects.
So the massive, profound electrolyte problems that people get on long-term ketogenic diets are...
Sorry, what? What massive and profound electrolyte problems that people get on a ketogenic diet, Paul? Shall we wait for some evidence that occurs to any meaningful level? It might happen if you poison yourself with copper and eat insufficient protein in one bolus during the day. That could happen. Happened to you, Paul, because you did it wrong.
Almost certainly due to a lack of insulin signaling at the level of the kidney. There are various levels of kidney physiology upon which insulin is going to act, but people in the ketogenic space, I think, are well-intentioned and they're trying to hold on to minerals by including massive amounts of salt in their diet, but it just doesn't work.
He just said,
well, it wouldn't do if your kidneys are leaky because of the issues that I'm talking about. And please, Simon, absolutely, a boy with no qualifications in physiology whatsoever, please correct Paul Saladino, a registered medical professional, on the normal functioning of the kidney tissue. Absolutely, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Arrogance, you say, Simon, do you? Okay.
Said the mass profound electrolyte problems.
What mass profound electrolyte problems? No, I thought not.
That people run into on longer term keto diets are because of a lack of insulin signaling to the kidneys. Translated into normal language, he doesn't have a foggy what he is talking about.
Says Simon from Essex. Oh, the hubris, the arrogance of this boy. Incredible.
The electrolyte issues that
By which I mean singly lacking in credibility, Simon.
people are having on those diets is often because they are eating nothing more than steak, fat, and salt. And it doesn't take a genius to understand how ridiculous that is.
Okay, back that up with anything whatsoever other than your ridiculous and completely untrained opinion. Shall we wait for that? I suspect he's going to attempt it now. This will be funny. Go on, Simon. Show us the breadth of your knowledge in this field. How ridiculous is it to eat a diet which is entirely indicated and species specific, informed by 4.5 million years?
Because you need an insulin signal at the level of the kidney to hold on to those things.
Still correct, and that is still sufficient.
The first thing I did when I sort of transitioned off a ketogenic, zero carb, quote unquote, carnivore diet was include honey in my diet. And the first
Good, so fructose in large amounts. Approximately somewhere between 7 and 11 times more glycating than glucose. Of course, you're also getting a bolus of glucose with the honey as well while you're at it. And then Paul Saladino turns around and says, oh, yes, but I'm not being damaged because look at my A1C, which remains within the acceptable range. Great, Paul, except the A1C test does not pick up damage caused by fructose, despite your false claim that it does. It does not. Furthermore, higher glycated hemoglobin and fructosamine levels failed to reflect the 77% increase in fasting blood fructose levels. These data indicate that neither assay can accurately detect in vivo fructation, Paul. These assays were developed for the detection of glucose amidori products, ketones, of hemoglobin and albumin, whereas fructose amidori products are aldehydes and would be expected to react differently. Paul, there it is in black and white from these scientists who actually understand the assays, unlike you. So you've misrepresented the statistics in this paper completely, incompetently, in a disgraceful and misanthropic fashion to suit your ideology and your addiction to sugar. And you've ignored, or not even read this paper, where these authors explain to you in clear, unambiguous terms that both the assays involved here are specific for glucose glycation. Wow. There it is. What's next?
first couple of days, I felt a little weird because I was physiologically insulin resistant. And then
That's a construct, Paul.
your body kind of adjusts to this. My blood sugar spikes normalize. And, if I eat honey today or a few years ago after I had adjusted to having the carbohydrates back in my diet, my blood sugar might go 130, 140, 150 milligrams per deciliter. But I don't worry about that because if you look at the actual shape of that curve, it comes back down to a baseline very quickly, within the hour for sure.
Again, there are some funnies to unpack there. So
tell us about the funnies, Simon.
let's go from a keto carnivore diet to introduce isolated sugars in the form of honey. No fiber to control the rate of absorption.
You don't need fiber. Fiber is contraindicated in the human diet just as much as is sugar and or carbohydrates taken in exogenously in any significant amount whatsoever. Because what do they all break down to, Simon? Sugar. Okay? Just the facts, though. Sorry about that.
No, we don't need to worry about that, do we, Paul? And what else did he say? You eat carbs and the blood sugar levels drop very quickly. And
that's because of an overactive response by way of the insulin. The body recognizes, emergency, too much sugar in the blood. We need to get it down. So let's shove it all into the cells until those cells, of course, lock the doors from the inside saying, no, thank you very much, we're full. It's called the Randall cycle. You should learn it, Simon. It's quite useful to know about.
this is what should happen when you are healthy. If this doesn't happen, then you need to fix the underlying cause for this rather than jumping on these types of ridiculous diets.
Ridiculous, Simon, once again, is everything you've ever said about anything publicly as far as I've seen. Absolutely everything.
This is normal human physiology, and we should not fear.
No, it isn't. Paul. 4.5 million years as hyper-carnivores. The consumption of exogenous carbohydrate was rare at best, not multiple times a day, every day, and certainly not in the form of isolated sugars. False, Paul.
Glucose spikes in a metabolically healthy individual. It's going to go up, it's going to come back down. That's normal, and that insulin
No, it isn't.
signaling is healthy for humans.
No, it isn't, Paul. False.
At so many levels, it's healthy for our hormones.
No, it isn't, Paul. False.
It's healthy for our brains. It's
No, it isn't, Paul. False.
healthy for the production of glutathione and the
No, it isn't, Paul. False again.
absorption of minerals. So
Wrong again, Paul. Not one single so-called fact there that you've just stated is correct in fact. No.
that idea of insulin being all bad all the time and including
Who said insulin is all bad all the time? I didn't. You need insulin signaling, remember? That one, though, not that one. Still,
carbohydrates in my diet, that was a huge, huge thing. And now we know, I mean, there's tons of research that I just didn't see at that point.
cite. If you want to invoke research, Paul, cite it so that we can show you how destitute your ability to read science is. I've already shown that a number of times, of course, in the past. Shall we have another look? Furthermore, higher glycated hemoglobin and fructosamine levels failed to reflect the 77% increase in fasting blood fructose levels. These data indicate that neither assay can accurately detect in vivo fructation. Paul. There it is. Awesome. Tell us all about the science, Paul.
This guy is unbelievable.
So are you, Simon. Completely.
This is not some groundbreaking knowledge that has just emerged in the literature.
Correct, it is not. It is also not knowledge. This is theology.
It has always been there. And this is why people like Paul Saladino need to leave the internet as soon as possible.
No, Simon. I agree that Paul Saladino does need to remain silent, shut down his channel, and go and crawl back into whatever hole he came out of. That I agree with. But you should go and join him, Simon. You are in no position to comment at all on this whatsoever. You have no training, no expertise, and no experience in this field whatsoever. You have no credibility. Go and crawl in the hole with Paul.
But I was sort of blind to about carbohydrates for athletes, carbohydrates post-exercise. I mean, we just worked out. I have holes in my shorts now from the weight belt. And this, this weight that I was using has ripped a hole in the front of my shorts here. And carbohydrates post-exercise are so clearly shown to improve performance. Carbohydrates overall are shown to improve all sorts of metrics in humans.
No, not all sorts of metrics at all. The statement about performance is true in the case where a person is not appropriately fat adapted. Fully carnivorous athletes not only compete well, they usually kick ass against carved-up athletes, Paul. In fact, you are out of your lane. This is not an area of expertise for you whatsoever. You should remain silent on this topic.
Testosterone, recovery, sleep, all kinds of things. So those are two big ones for me.
False.
From the outset.
All I heard there was blah, blah, blah.
I agree. That's all we hear from you too, Simon. Pustulous, rancid, excremental disinformation.
And I would bet my house on the fact that Thomas is on steroids.
Go ahead. Bet your house. Go ahead. Thomas, are you on steroids? Let us know.
On the cramping side, I've got a question. As far as, because I've experienced that when I'm low carb, right? I'm very, very prone to cramping, which as someone that does a lot of endurance stuff, it's problematic. Like if I'm backcountry or anything like that. I was just doing a long trek and ran into a huge cramping issue, even though I'm not.
Yeah, but you're not fat adapted appropriately, Thomas, because you are not 100% carnivore. That's what the problem is.
For low carb anymore. I guess I'd still lowish carb.
There you go. Lowish carb is not the answer in terms of the dietary intake. To all intents and purposes, the correct intake of carbohydrates in the human diet is as close to zero as possible, but certainly, ideally, well under 50 grams per day total.
And I would argue that it actually takes time to actually recover from some of that insulin issue that you have with the kidneys. But the question that I've always had, and maybe you know the answer, since protein is insulinogenic, can you get some resorption of the minerals through the insulin spike with protein, or does
You can get all the resorption of minerals you require. There are many, many 100% carnivores floating around in this space, letting us know about it, who do not have electrolyte issues, because that is sufficient.
the glucagon cancel that out in that case?
Two people talking about the cramping issues they have on their ridiculous diets and expect.
Says Simon, who's never had any health challenges of his own, has he not? Perhaps people would like to look back through Simon's history, things that he's been quite open about. You steaming hypocrite. You ridiculous child. You mental midget. You hypocrite.
Expecting the internet to take them seriously about health and nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. We should all take you seriously instead, shouldn't we, Simon? Based on your Wednesday afternoon certificate in bumfuckery.
Welcome to 2023.
I mean,
Thanks. It's great, isn't it? It's much better than 20, 21, 22 so far. Long may it continue to be better than that.
you get some, it's just nowhere near. If you look at the amount of insulin and the level of insulin you get with carbohydrates, it's much higher than it is with just protein. I mean,
So, an opinion from Paul Saladino. Well, Paul, if you're going to change your opinions every couple of years, why should we take any of your opinions seriously, including the ones that you're espousing right now? Perhaps you'd like to go to some actual empirical evidence on whether or not that is sufficient. It still is.
you get some with protein, it's just not the same as a carbohydrate spike. And
We know you don't get the same insulin response, but more isn't necessarily better. In fact, it necessarily is not. Okay?
so people in communities that are fearful of carbohydrates will say, look at how much insulin you're getting. And that's good. You need that. And so
No, you don't.
people
Still.
understand this also. Like when you don't eat carbohydrates, you become insulin resistant. This is
Nonsense. Insulin resistance, the way you're describing it, Paul, i.e., begging the Christian fallacy that it is a pathology and is negative. No, it isn't. It's adaptive. It's a normal part of metabolic functioning. In fact, it's called the Randall cycle. You should go and look it up, Paul. I believe you tried to make it. Well, I know you tried to make a video about that at some point, and I've put you to the sword on that one as well, if people want to go and have a look at that one as well. Paul Saladino is completely without credibility. People who listen to Paul Saladino deserve what they get. Okay?
this is not the pathological insulin resistance. of diabetes, which is different physiology that I can describe.
The pathology of diabetes, Paul, is elevated blood sugar, for f***'s sake, not insulin. Gordon Bennett.
This is the insulin resistance of physiology. Basically, historically, evolutionarily, this is starvation insulin resistance, meaning
Nonsense.
that you are physiologically insulin resistant. Your body is saying, hey, spare the glucose, any glucose you're getting, spare that for the brain, the adrenals, and the gonads, and maybe the red blood cells. Don't put it in the muscles. That's physiologic insulin resistance, and that's what you see in people who are low carb or zero carb or keto. And
So it's adaptive and not a pathology.
that's why the first time someone like that eats carbohydrates, they may feel very strange, or the blood sugar may go up.
Despite all of that being well known for decades, Paul has spent the last few years telling people that fruits and vegetables are toxic to humans.
They are. That's why he said that, until somebody paid him to say something different, I suspect. But that's for another day.
The absolute brass neck of this guy is unbelievable.
Says Simon, who holds a Wednesday afternoon degree in kid-ling, probably, and no credibility in this field at all.
This is why a woman who is low carb will fail a glucola test in her pregnancy, because that is physiologic insulin resistance. And I actually have come to believe that's not a good thing. I don't think we want to be physiologically insulin resistant.
So your opinion again, Paul. Your ridiculous, unfounded opinion.
It is a historically, evolutionarily adaptive thing for extreme situations. But I think that humans do.
You mean an adaptive response to the normal physiological context of the human species over at least the last 350,000 years as humans. And 4.5 million in species immediately pre-human, but not yet quite human. God's sake, this is ridiculous.
Better. And I've come to see carbohydrates as a signal of abundance.
Then you are an idiot.
I mean, if you go to spend time with the Hadza,
But then we knew that.
or the Maasai, or the Samburu, or the Khoisan, I mean, these tribes invariably seek carbohydrates, and
This is irrelevant to anything. The Hadza are a modern group of humans. They exist in modernity now.
celebrate it. They don't think, oh, I've had 100 carbs today already, I'm not going to eat this. When I was with the Hadza, we found
You mean you sat with the Hadza for half an hour for a photo opportunity and then you buggered off? Mary Ruddock was there. She knows how long you were there and sat with them, Paul. Okay?
beehive, and they just went off on this thing. I mean, I got a big chunk of beehive and ate it with the larva in there and the honey, and it's amazing. And the three Hadza guys that I was with were probably ate 60, 70% of the honey in this hive. And
do they do that every day, Paul? No, they don't. Idiot.
Shared a little bit with their comrades when they came back. Say, hey, we found a hive. Here's a small amount for you guys. But they'd eaten a ton of the stuff.
So we all need to nail as much isolated sugar as possible now.
No, we don't.
Imagine him talking in a couple of years when he has figured out the importance of fiber.
There is no importance in fiber. Well, there is. The important thing about fiber is to realize that it's contraindicated in the human diet. You should not consume fiber. Fiber is apparently deleterious to function of the human enteric system, Simon.
Historically, I think humans had massive exposure to carbohydrates whenever they could get it, as much as they could get it.
Yeah.
They didn't fear it at all.
Because they couldn't get it. Idiot.
I would agree. I mean, I definitely feel like, to say that carbohydrates aren't evolutionarily correct is invalid.
No, it's not invalid, Thomas. It's absolutely valid. What was the source for large amounts of carbohydrate on a daily basis, multiple times a day for human beings as we evolved over the last 350,000 years? Thomas, what was the source of that? Shall we wait? In the meantime, while we're waiting, do go and buy Cerule from Thomas.
I think there's always access to them at some point, one way or another.
And humans are seeking them. If we don't have them, we're seeking them. If we can't find them in berries, I didn't mean to cut you off, but if we can't find them in berries, if we can't find them in honey, we're going to find them in roots. Yeah.
Oh my God. Are you serious, Paul Saladino? Roots as they were before we intervened and selectively bred them to have carbohydrate in them, they didn't. They were mostly fiber. Paul, fiber breaks down a little bit in the human enteric system and produces some short-chain fatty acid, which is 100% saturated, by the way. Not sugar. Goodness sake.
It's a piece, just like, I mean, it's interesting. It's just so intuitive and simple.
Again, I love the fact that he says all of this is so simple and intuitive. Couldn't be that intuitive and simple if you were so confused about fruit just 18 months ago.
No, he wasn't. He's confused now. He was not confused previously. So you've got that 180 degrees out of phase with reality, which is not a surprise for you, Simon, because you have no grasp on reality, clearly.
We're looking for animal protein. We're looking for nutrients and organs. That's clear. We're always eating the whole animal. But the next thing, I think, in tandem with that, we're also seeking carbohydrates as wild humans. We've forgotten what wild humans look like because we all, except for maybe a couple thousand people on the planet today, live as semi-domesticated humans. But it's very clear. I mean, if you look at the Hadza, so there was a PhD researcher who actually spent a lot of time with them and gave them surveys of these nomadic tribes and said, what are your favorite foods? And there were 5 foods that were their favorite. So there was...
Who cares? This is irrelevant to anything. For goodness sake.
There was meat, there were berries, there was baobab, there was tubers, and I forget the last one, I'll think of it in a moment. But honey was invariably the first thing that they wanted. Both men and women ranked honey as number 1.
Yeah, because it was a treat that they rarely get. The fact that they came out with all the honey and gave it to you was because you were a guest for half an hour with them, Paul, while you sat there for a photo opportunity. Okay?
And men said meat as number 2. Women ranked berries.
What was number 2 again? Meat. In terms of their preference. But so what?
Baobab and tubers, I think all about the same. But in both groups, the roots were sort of the last thing that they wanted to eat.
Exactly, because it was subsistence.
Wow, man, that's wild.
But both of them...
that's what they ate when we couldn't get prey to eat. Because it either wasn't there or the hunt was unsuccessful for some reason, whatever.
Really, that was the favorite thing for them, was honey.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. It's delicious.
They celebrated it more than anything, right? And if you look at these people, there are tons of studies of them, of their cardiovascular health. They're not. They have insulin sensitivity, which is amazing, which is exemplary. They're not insulin resistant.
Still a construct.
They're not diabetic. They're not obese. So
my own anecdotal experience, I don't eat an abundance of carbohydrates, but I've added honey and fruit in, and my insulin sensitivity has improved on my lab work.
Still a construct, Thomas. And still a construct that almost everybody that I've ever spoken to about this does not understand and does not conceive of accurately.
So, I mean, it's...
By fasting insulin, which is perhaps the most clear metric you could ever use. That's unquestionable.
Yeah, but Paul, you have no idea what a clear metric is. Clearly, you have shown yourself to be absolutely incompetent to interpret scientific literature on multiple occasions. So why would we take your opinion on that remotely seriously? Why?
An improvement in insulin sensitivity.
There we have it, guys. That's what happens when you cross 2 confused individuals.
You and Paul. That's what you get. You get grist for our comedy mill. You get to laugh along with the professor, putting you buffoons back in your box. Good stuff.
With the recipe book, they end up making a soup sandwich because the instructions weren't clear enough. All jokes aside, what can you even say about Pinky and Perky here in this video?
Oh, Simon, bless. You're a hoot. You're also a idiot.
The amount of people they've already influenced to change their diets is absolutely shocking.
Shocking. That's a value judgment statement. It has no value in reality.
And there is not even a mention of remorse from either of them.
Well, the remorse that they should show is for what they're currently saying. Okay? Not for what they did say when they were correct about 4 years ago. Mostly correct. As I say, some pretty basic errors made by Paul Saladino there, precisely because he failed to ask someone that knows something about it before leaping.
Anyhow, that's the end of today's video. And
thank that.
If you enjoyed this video,
I did not.
Then be sure to check out this one up here because I'm sure you'll find it equally interesting.
No, we won't be doing that.
And the only other thing that's left me to say is to remember to look after your body because it's the only place you have to live.
In which case you should listen to someone who knows something about that, and that's not Simon here from Essex. Good. Join me next time when somebody else will be wrong on the interwebs, because it really doesn't look like slowing down at any stage soon, does it? As you watch this video, rest easy in the knowledge that I am actually no longer where I am here in New Zealand at the moment, recording this video. In several days, I'll be stateside in Hawaii, enjoying a trip, which I earned through my activities in marketing cereal products. You too can come next year if you like as well. Ask me about it and I'll tell you. Until then, see you when I get back from Hawaii after a week. Enjoying that. See you then. Ciao for now.